Greetings. In this lecture, I'm going to briefly describe the importance of studying history and social theory. To begin, studying the history of education will help us to see how schooling and society have developed over time. It will help us to appreciate the dynamic quality of our own time. It will provide an impact of social change and offer a point of comparison. We want to be sure to not fall into chronocentrism, the belief that one's generation is somehow different and even better than others. Schools are studied because they are a centerpiece of American society and have been leaders in important periods of change. Schools provide access to societal resources, which begs the question, do schools reduce social disparities or perpetuate social inequalities? Schools were once thought to be the most equalizing institution of our society. However, public schools play as much of a role in magnifying differences between children from wealthy and impoverished backgrounds and between children of different ethnic and racial backgrounds as they do in overcoming these differences. Schools are the most familiar American institution. People's experiences in schools are quite similar. There are patterns and traditions to schools that are universal. At the birth of our nation, schools' primary focus was to help forge a national American identity, and now our focus on contributing to economic growth and political change. Dr. Carpenter has a very interesting study on this very topic, looking at presidential addresses and how presidents have rationalized the importance of schooling. Schools also have and continue to function as a means for the socialization of children. And schools have been both a causal agent of social change and an aspect of American life that has changed because of other social forces. The classic example here is Brown versus Board of Education, which serves as the hallmark to the desegregation efforts in America that ushered in the civil rights movement of the 1960s. Education is a complex human experience of individual growth and development. It is linked to power and social status. Education serves as the transmission of culture. It transmits knowledge and values across generations that are essential to the welfare of society. John Dewey calls teaching the moral profession of a democracy. Teachers and communities make decisions on what information needs to be imparted upon children for a successful future and a successful democracy. John Dewey famously said, "Education is not preparation for life, education is life." Cultural, social, and human capital are terms we will use throughout this course. Cultural capital was coined by Pierre Bourdieu in the 1970s and refers to the socially desirable traits an individual possesses that gives them advantages in social life and often access to higher status. Cultural capital can help explain school success. It is premised under the recognition that cultures are not seen as equal. Certain patterns of behavior, values, and attitudes are more widely admired and rewarded in our society than others. It represents a form of wealth. Parents can pass their cultural capital down to their children through providing learning materials at home, an interest in education, the ability to help their children navigate and maneuver through institutions. In order for cultural capital to be transmitted from one generation to the next, positive and sustained relationships must exist, which lead us to social capital. Coined by James Coleman, social capital are the advantageous networks of association and influence that benefit individuals. In college, fraternities and sororities consider themselves powerful networks of association, and I know we've all heard it's not what you know, but who you know. Social capital is useful to help us understand how and why some individuals and groups have succeeded in the larger society. For example, Jewish and Asian populations, especially new populations to the U.S., historically have had high levels of school attendance, even with low levels of conventional cultural capital. And finally, human capital refers to differences in productive skills and knowledge that help explain why some people and groups are more economically productive than others. Education is a very valuable economic resource and is also associated with social status. One can increase their human capital through training and education. Higher levels of education usually lead to more earning potential. Thus, the outcome of schooling can contribute to one's economic advancement. I want you to consider which of these three capitals is most socially advantageous to you and your professional goals. We will discuss in class. Another important concept for us to discuss is ideology, which refers to the system of ideas and beliefs that people use to interpret their circumstances and to guide their actions. At the birth of our schooling, both K-12 and higher education, the ideology of Protestantism, capitalism, and republicanism were at its root. Protestant, the idea of work is its own reward, thriftiness is next to godliness, were important ideological concepts to our early schooling. Hard work was rewarded in the free market capitalistic system, so that also underpinned some of our values, and teaching children what it meant to live in a democratic republic was important to schooling. We've also had different ideologies come into our schooling. There is the traditionalists versus the social meliorists. The traditionalists believe the curriculum should be tied to the power of reason, and the finest elements of Western cultural heritage needed to be preserved through schools, whereas the social meliorists believe that curriculum should focus on the corruption, inequalities, and abuses of society, so a new generation would be equipped to deal effectively with the problems of America. They believe schools should promote social justice and correct social evils, and that schools had the power to create a new social vision, thus a responsibility to do so. Another ideology that has really underpinned our schooling is this culture of meritocracy versus this culture of discrimination. Under the culture of meritocracy, the idea was that with equal opportunity, an equal playing field was created. Thus, with hard work, your status would be defined by your merits and your achievements. Yet we know, throughout history, and with the studying we'll do in this class, schooling also had a tradition of discrimination, racism, sexism, etc., which was held up legally and by custom, withholding opportunities for certain groups of people. As noted by Rory, historians no longer have a monopoly on studying the past, as social sciences, particularly sociologists, economists, and political scientists, have brought new ideas and theories about society to test and refine with the use of historical evidence. He notes Theodore Roosick's coining the term master ideas to describe the notions that help to shape our thoughts, with the example of the term industrialization. Industrialization represented a shift in society and the organization of work that accompanied the rise of mass production manufacturing. He notes industrialization transformed society on a grand scale as it created a whole new way of life, one that turned from an agrarian lifestyle to an urban lifestyle, one that increased cultural conflict and political instabilities, and profoundly shaped schools by giving new and special attention to the role of organization and efficiency, as well as how to prepare children for a rapidly changing technological world. Large concepts such as these assist us in thinking about how society changes and the ways these changes affect people's lives. As we move forward in this class, let's remember to consider not only how historians view history, but also how social scientists view it. Here are some questions to think about while reading these books. Number 1, do schools change society, or does society change schools? Can schools function effectively as instruments of social change? And how are schools shaped by larger social, economic, and political forces at play in society?